Good evening. Welcome to South Asia Newsline. I'm Arjun Chaudhary. Here are the top stories we're tracking for you on Thursday, the 14th of May. Taliban siege on Kabul guest house leaves at least 14 dead. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi begins three-day visit to China. And Pakistan observes national mourning for victims of Karachi sectarian attack. And now for all the details. At least 14 people, including 4 Indians, were confirmed dead in a Taliban attack in Afghan capital Kabul on Thursday. The militant siege on a guest house lasted for nearly 7 hours.
Afghan officials on Thursday confirmed that the Taliban siege was over and that all the assailants were gunned down. The 7 people killed also included a US national. At least 54 people were rescued. Heavily armed gunmen stormed into the guest house in the posh Kabul neighborhood late on Wednesday when a number of foreign dignitaries were awaiting a musical concert. According to reports, the target of the assault were Indian nationals as the gunmen assumed the presence of Indian envoy to Afghanistan, Amar Sinha, in the hotel at the time of the attack. Attack on the guest house, popular with foreigners, was the second major militant strike in the country on Wednesday. 7 people were killed in southern Helmand earlier in the day when gunmen opened fire at a meeting of Ulema Council, the highest religious authority in Afghanistan. The Taliban, which launched its annual spring-summer offensive last month, claimed responsibility for Wednesday's twin attacks.
The victims of the Karachi bus attack were laid to rest on Thursday. Though no arrests have been made so far, investigators in Pakistan claimed the gunmen hailed from Afghanistan.
Thousands, including members of the Ismaili community and various political parties, offered funeral prayers before laying the victims to rest in Karachi. Pakistan marked a national day of mourning on Thursday to express solidarity for the deceased. Several regions also observed shutdowns as residents suspended their work in grief for the victims of the terrorist attack. University of Karachi and Urdu University also postponed all examinations, which were scheduled for Thursday.
इतनी प्यारी और इतनी मासूम कम्युनिटी है जिस पर ये हमला हुआ है, इसकी जितनी भी मजम्मत की जाए मैं समझता हूँ कम है। अवाम जो है उसके अंदर खौफ है, दहशतगर्द जो हैं वो आज़ाद हैं, वो जहाँ चाहते हैं जो काम कर लेते हैं और हमारी फोर्समेंट एजेंसियाँ जो हैं उनको अभी तक पकड़ने में नाकाम है।
At least 45 people were killed, including over a dozen women, when gunmen on motorcycles attacked a bus carrying 50 members of Shia Ismaili community on Wednesday in the volatile city of Karachi. Jandullah, a splinter group of Taliban, claimed responsibility for the strike. The militia, which has attacked Muslim minorities before, had pledged allegiance to the Islamic State in November last year. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif condemned the brutal attack and called a high-level meeting with Army Chief General Raheel Sharif and other senior officials. He also visited bereaved families of the victims later in the day, along with former President Asif Ali Zardari. Condolences poured from across the world too. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon on Wednesday slammed the deadly incident and asked the Pakistan government to take note of the rising attacks on minorities and punish the perpetrators.
Taking note that a number of attacks against the Shia and Christian minorities have taken place in the recent past in Pakistan, the Secretary General urges the government of Pakistan to take swift measures aimed at effective protection of religious minorities in the country.
Spiritual leader of the Ismailis, Prince Aga Khan, expressed shock and sadness, calling the incident a senseless act of violence against a peaceful community. Following the attack, people of Karachi, including several political parties, took to candlelight vigils on Wednesday. Many in Gilgit-Baltistan's Hunza region also took to protests to register their anger. Investigators said a search operation was underway and a probe was on to bring the culprits to justice.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was given a ceremonial welcome as he began his 3-day China tour on Thursday. The visit is seen as a move to cement bilateral ties between the two Asian giants, often seen as being pitted against each other in the race for dominance in the region.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was welcomed by Provincial Governor Lu Qingjian in Xi'an, the capital of Shaanxi. Prime Minister Modi also visited the Terracotta Warriors Museum in the city, which is also the hometown of Chinese President Xi Jinping. The Terracotta Army is a collection of sculptures depicting the armies of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. The Indian Prime Minister later visited Dakshinshan Buddhist temple, where he interacted with the priests. Built in around 290 AD, it is one of the oldest Buddhist temples in the world. It is the place where Indian monks translated the Buddhist doctrine to Chinese. In one of the rarest instances of the Chinese leadership meeting a visiting country head outside Beijing, President Xi welcomed the Indian Prime Minister in Xi'an. The two sides also held a delegation-level meeting attended by both the country heads. Prime Minister Modi later left for capital Beijing for the second leg of his three-day visit. During his stay in the country, he is set to focus on balancing the bilateral trade, which is currently heavily in favor of China. Prime Minister Modi is also expected to take up the long-standing boundary issue with the political leadership in Beijing and make a push for more Chinese investment in India.
And since China had been graduating from low technology to medium technology, and China had become one of the major manufacturing centers in the world. So I think the visit is quite obvious from this point of view to make the Make in India policy successful.
Even though both countries expressed desire to strengthen bilateral ties, the frequent skirmishes at the border and the growing Chinese presence in Pakistan could unsettle the relations. Ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit, India had summoned Chinese envoy to register its protest over the $46 billion China-Pakistan economic corridor, which passes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
In the light of an ever-growing threat from the Taliban in Afghanistan, the NATO has decided to maintain its allied forces even after the end of its current mission.
The NATO and Afghan leaders have agreed on a framework for a future joint military-civilian presence in Afghanistan after its training mission ends. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg on Wednesday held talks with Afghan Foreign Minister Salahuddin Rabbani on the sidelines of a two-day meeting of NATO foreign ministers in Turkey. The current mission, known as Resolute Support, is a NATO-led non-combat mission which was launched in January following the conclusion of its previous operation.
We have stated that it's going to be a civilian-led partnership. And that's something new, because both the ISAF mission, the combat mission, but also the present Resolute Support mission is military-led. It's led by a military commander. Now it's going to be, the enduring partnership is going to be led by a civilian.
Stoltenberg asserted that the next task will be to advise and instruct Afghan security institutions, helping them become self-sufficient against a resilient Taliban insurgency plaguing the country. Though the new mission, billed as Enduring Partnership, is expected to be smaller, the exact number of personnel is yet to be decided. The latest plan would come into effect in 2016. There are currently around 17,000 foreign troops in Afghanistan under the security pacts concluded by Afghan President Ashraf Ghani in September last year. It allowed US-led NATO forces to stay in Afghanistan to train Afghan forces to conduct counter-terrorism missions.
Indian Supreme Court's order curbing the use of pictures of officials and political party leaders in government-paid advertisements is seeing mixed reactions from lawmakers. While the full-page newspaper ads were a common feat in India, a public interest lawsuit has, however, challenged the practice.
India's top court ruled yesterday that central and state governments can only publish photographs of the President, Prime Minister and Chief Justice in government-funded ads, and only with prior approval. But in a move that overturns a long-standing practice, pictures of elected officials such as chief ministers and other political posts cannot be used in state-paid ads. The court said that such ads provide a political advantage which is not allowed using public funds.
Supreme Court, while allowing two important public interest petitions filed by the Center for Public Interest Litigation and Common Cause, has directed that government advertisements cannot be used to project political personalities or to derive any political advantage from the use of those advertisements which are issued on government funds, on public funds.
The Supreme Court also directed the federal government to form a 3-member committee to ensure the implementation of the ruling. The outcome drew mixed political reactions. But there are also those who feel the Supreme Court is taking away an effective way to communicate with the people.
हमारी जनता शिक्षित है, बहुत बुद्धिमान है, लेकिन कई बार वो इस बात को नहीं समझ पाती कि कौन सा कार्य कौन कर रहा है, और क्योंकि भारत सरकार राज्य सरकार के बीच में भी जो कामों का बंटवारा है वो लोगों को स्पष्ट नहीं रहता है, कई बार इश्तहारों के माध्यम से ही सरकार अपनी बात रख पाती है.
The ruling might be a blow to the ministers who use the ads to get across their own messages. But analysts note that the public money can now instead be spent on much needed programs. Avneet Arora for South Asia Newsline in New Delhi.
An anti-terrorism court in Pakistan has permanently exempted ex-President Pervez Musharraf from appearing in person in the Nawab Akbar Khan Bukti murder case. The court on Wednesday, however, said the exemption given on medical grounds was conditional, and that the former dictator could be summoned whenever required. Musharraf's lawyer had last month sought a permanent exemption, citing that he was suffering from spinal and cardiac diseases. Musharraf is the main accused in the Bukti murder case. The Baloch nationalist leader was killed in 2006 in a military operation ordered by Musharraf, who was then president and army chief. He has never appeared in court during the entire legal process, which began in 2009. Nepal continues to face aftershocks after the second massive quake jolted the nation on Tuesday. While the death toll crossed 80, rescuers are looking for survivors from the debris of fresh building collapses. A report.
Rescue operations resumed in Nepal on Wednesday amid a dozen aftershocks a day after the earthquake measuring 7.3 hit the nation, the second one in less than 3 weeks. Nepal army and relief workers rushed for search of survivors as more buildings collapsed in Kathmandu, the worst hit region yet again. The latest jolts shattered the infrastructure, which had already been weakened by last month's catastrophe. Several buildings still lean precariously on the streets of the capital city after the two earthquakes. Residents said they feared more tremblers could take away whatever little was left in their homeland.
म यता पछाडीतिर मेरो गोदाम यहाँ पछाडी छ यता वरिपरि डुलिरहेको थिए त्यही आइरहेको त्यही बसिरहेको क्रममा चाहिँ त्यो भुइँचालो गएको थियो पछि आउँदाखेरि यो दृश्य मेरो पनि जस्तै
Kathmandu's Darbar Square, which became a heap of rubble after the April disaster, has now become a camping ground for survivors who have put up tarpaulin shelters alongside the magnificent ruins of the centuries-old temples.
कोई बड़ा बिल्डिंग आएगा और उसमें दब जाएगा वही डर है और मरने से तो जो भी डर लगता है ना.
तो क्या लगता है कब तक यहीं रहोगे?
अब ये कोई हम ये कह नहीं सकेंगे ये कितने दिन में रोकेगा ये और कब ये शांत होगा ये तो अब किसी को पता भी नहीं है. अब जब तक शांत नहीं होता है मैं भी सभी लोग यहीं पर होगा.
The upcoming monsoon could also affect the already volatile Nepal, experts believe. People living in higher regions of Sindhu Palchok district now fear the rains may trigger more killer landslides. In a report to the government last week, the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development in Kathmandu identified 6 critical landslides that have blocked rivers after the April 25 earthquake. While 5 occurred in Nepal, 1 took place in Tibet.
Well, that's the way it was in South Asia this evening. Before we conclude the top stories once again. Taliban siege on Kabul guest house leaves at least 14 dead. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi begins 3-day visit to China. And Pakistan observes national mourning for victims of Karachi sectarian attack. Now viewers can watch the show on SouthAsiaNewsline.com. You can also visit us on Facebook.com/SAsiaNewsline and follow us on Twitter @SAsiaNewsline. That's all in tonight's edition. We'll see you same time tomorrow. Good night.